This one conversation could end the bloodshed in Ukraine, save the lives of thousands of civilians, and put an end to the war. US President Donald Trump wants to persuade Vladimir Putin to call a ceasefire and enter into peace negotiations with Ukraine. Today, President Trump and President Putin spoke about the need for peace and a ceasefire in the Ukraine war. Both leaders agreed this conflict needs to end with a lasting peace. They also stressed the need for improved bilateral relations between the United States and Russia. Trump and Putin agreed that civilians must be protected and that peace talks must begin with the cessation of attacks on energy infrastructure, leading eventually to a full truce. Negotiations are continuing. Donald Trump's staff gave a brief update on the outcome of the conversation. It's happening now. President Trump is in the Oval Office talking to Russian President Vladimir Putin. The conversation is going well. The Washington-Moscow call started at 9 a.m. Central Standard Time. Today's conversation between Donald Trump and Putin is really part of a longer process, a process that the United States has already mapped out from the very beginning of its attempt to resolve this conflict. It is worth recalling that the United States has been very transparent throughout the process and has been playing its cards very openly. And in fact, what American diplomacy outlined a few weeks ago is slowly and gradually being implemented. Shortly before Donald Trump's meeting with Vladimir Putin, US Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio arrived at the White House to discuss the final details and stand by the president during these tough negotiations. Donald Trump puts it clearly. The most important thing is to stop civilian casualties. This war cannot be resolved on the battlefield. It can only be ended diplomatically.
We want to see if we can bring that war to an end. Maybe we can, maybe we can't, but I think we have a very good chance.
Hence, the US has pursued talks, even with the aggressor in this war. The US administration wants to make sure that Putin stops killing innocent people in Ukraine. Putin may be encouraged to accept a ceasefire by the prospect of loosening economic sanctions. America may also threaten him, for example, by rearming Ukraine if the Kremlin does not accept the terms of the agreement. Trump is the last hope for peace in Ukraine. There is a chance for it, and today's conversation may result in peace, although you have to look at the Russians in a different way. They are not people you can trust. Kiev believes that in the relationship of the American president and in bringing peace negotiations with Russia to a conclusion.
With the leadership of President Trump,
we believe that under President Donald Trump's leadership, we will achieve a long and lasting peace. Now is the time for strong diplomacy. Donald Trump takes the mission of bringing peace to Ukraine seriously. After the talks with Vladimir Zelensky in the Oval Office failed, he gave Kiev a second chance, and the American and Ukrainian delegations reached an agreement in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Now Moscow has been given a similar chance by Trump. He has led to equal, one might say, consultations between the two parties to the conflict. That is, Moscow on the one hand and Kiev on the other. These talks are groundbreaking because for 3 years it has not been possible to advance the process to such an extent. The left-wing European political establishment has done nothing for 3 years to bring peace to Ukraine. They did help the Ukrainians militarily and financially, but did nothing to meaningfully break the stalemate. Now they're counting on Donald Trump to do the hardest part.
A full ceasefire and agree to serious negotiations towards not just a pause, but a lasting peace.
Today's conversation is an important prelude to what Ukraine's war-weary citizens and soldiers have been waiting for. The chances of a ceasefire, a truce, or even lasting peace in Ukraine are greater than ever before, if both sides sit down at the negotiating table. Record support for Karol Nawrocki, the Civic candidate for president, collected 1,300,000 signatures. His main rival, Rafał Trzaskowski, submitted about 200,000 fewer. The collected votes have already been submitted to the State Election Commission. Such a result testifies to real citizen support, mobilization and commitment. The number of signatures collected leaves no illusions. Karol Nawrocki has entered the political scene with great force.
A za mną stoi najlepszy sondaż.
And behind me is the best poll, the 1.3 million signatures. The goodwill win, a safe Poland, a Poland of prosperity and a developing Poland. This is evidence not only of overwhelming public support, but also of the growing need for change in Polish politics. Polish citizens look to Karol Nawrocki for change, the sphere of normality. Back in the day, if a politician said that normality was something he or she was striving for, then everyone would wonder what the politician meant. But these days, normality is actually rare. Such a good result is no coincidence. The mobilization of the people is a signal that Poles want a candidate who sticks to the chosen path. Rafał Trzaskowski often changes his mind, adjusting his position to current expectations, and this raises doubts about his real beliefs and intentions.
Rafał
Trzaskowski addresses the message to his own people, but also wants to be a president who will get a good result. So he is trying to reach a wider electorate. Thus, he has to contradict his words. Therefore, he is not credible. There's a reason politicians in the ruling camp are afraid of losing. If it is a referendum over the Tusk government, then we will most likely lose these elections. There is little indication that these elections will be Tusk's government versus the opposition, which could lead to Trzaskowski winning these elections. I am being brutally honest here. More and more people believe that Rafał Trzaskowski is losing a realistic chance to become president. I go around Poland and I hear some things, and I know that at Trzaskowski's meetings there is almost no one but Civic Platform functionaries. At our meetings, I'm talking about all right-wing meetings, namely Mentzen, Nawrocki, Braun, Jakubiak. Our meeting halls are practically full. So the question is, what does it mean? If Rafał Trzaskowski enters the second round, his popularity will no longer increase. Many people are asking themselves, if after a year and a half of Donald Tusk's rule, the unfulfilled promises are increasing, what would Poland look like if, as Grzegorz Schetina said, the system was closed? Every vote matters. Young people are also saying this loudly. We are now facing a choice. Do we want an independent, subjective, sovereign Poland, or do we want a Poland that will submit to all EU directives, EU ideas such as the Migration Pact or the Green Deal? I think young people want a Poland that will develop. In exactly 2 months from now, on the 18th of May, there will be a presidential election in Poland. Each of us can realistically influence what our future will look like. It is up to us, Poles, what direction our country will take.
The Israeli army resumed large-scale airstrikes in the Gaza Strip early this morning after a ceasefire of almost 2 months. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered the army to take decisive action against Hamas in response to the latter's refusal to release the remaining hostages and to accept the proposal for a permanent ceasefire. The attack was carried out after consultation with the U.S. administration. In a special announcement, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz said that the anti-terrorist operation in Gaza had been resumed because Hamas had refused to release the hostages and threatened further attacks on Israel Defense Forces soldiers and the Israeli community. Israeli authorities claim that they will not stop fighting until all the hostages are back home and all the war objectives have been achieved. Hamas terrorists, on the other hand, accuse Israel of breaking the hard-negotiated ceasefire, putting the lives of 59 Israeli hostages still being held in the Gaza Strip at risk. Palestinian authorities report that over 220 people were killed last night as a result of the Israeli air raid.
A breakthrough after more than 60 years, the declassification of documents relating to the death of American President John F. Kennedy, who was fatally shot in Dallas in 1963. With the decision of the current U.S. President Donald Trump, the assassination records of 2 other influential Americans will also see the light of day. The great mystery of the assassination of the 35th President of the United States and the historic decision by his successor, more than half a century later, 47th President Donald Trump has ordered to declassify documents relating to the Kennedy assassination.
That's a big one, huh? A lot of people are waiting for this for years, for decades.
A total of 80,000 pages of documents from the investigation after the assassination. Their publication is an election promise of the American president, but also a tribute to a great predecessor. Trump visited the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. yesterday.
We're at the Kennedy Center. Needs a lot of work. We're going to fix it, make it beautiful. It's a very big part of the fabric of D.C. and the Capitol. We're bringing back the Capitol. We're bringing back our country. But while we're here, I thought it would be appropriate. We are tomorrow announcing and giving all of the Kennedy files.
JFK died in November 1963 in front of millions of Americans watching him drive through the streets of Dallas, Texas. The backstory of the assassination case still stirs enormous emotions today. One of the best documented theories is that the assassination was ordered by the authorities of the Soviet Union, as pointed out by many service people on both sides of the Iron Curtain. But more theories continue to emerge. This case has not been well explained at the time when all this happened, when it was still fresh and there were many different doubts. Thus, many conspiracy theories emerged around this case, and many people spoke out. Therefore, these statements are often contradictory. Surveys conducted over the decades since the assassination have shown that 80% of Americans believe that key evidence in the case was covered up. The Kennedy assassination was a shock to the United States. After all, it was the Cold War, the culmination of the Cold War. And on the other hand, it was the assassination of the President of the United States. Thousands of publications and films have been produced and are still being produced on the Kennedy assassination. John F. Kennedy is still one of the most recognized and honored presidents in U.S. history. This name is also known because Kennedy died under tragic circumstances, as did his brother a few years later. Hence, this name is associated in America with politics and with such tragic events. Many Americans, statistically speaking, know better during which years Kennedy was in power than, for example, Lyndon Johnson or Dwight Eisenhower. The documents declassified by President Trump include a total of 3 names: John F. Kennedy, his brother Robert Kennedy, who was also assassinated 5 years later, and Martin Luther King, an activist for the equality of African Americans, who was shot in the same year.